This is the CW Spiral, a podcast run by 3 survivors of the CW's colon in 2022. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson,
and Reed Gauden,
bringing you history about the network and the WB, the latest news and in-depth Sporterville discussions of the best and messiest shows to ever grace the small screen. Okay, so we are launching back into our Tarzan journey, but before we get to episode 3, we do have some CW news to talk about. First up being that Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa gave some insight into the way that they had pivoted in the last season of Riverdale, meaning that while some people had wanted to not stay in the 50s, they chose to stay in the 50s instead of doing their original idea, which was to send us through the decades somehow. Half the season would have been in the 50s, and then the rest of the season would have been us going through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and presumably somehow ending up in the present. How they were going to do that in 10 episodes, considering the long arcs this series likes to do, I don't know how that would have been accomplished, but apparently they didn't either, which is why they decided to scrap the idea.
And God bless,
Yes.
that would have been biting off way more than they can chew. I'm glad they were like, wait a minute, let's just stay put.
Yeah. Like Riverdale's a vibe. I feel like if you could see Riverdale in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, each of those episodes would have been amazing on their own kind of aesthetic. But you're right, it started its own monster in the 50s, and I feel like it would have undercut all the storylines it told them then, trying to rush through. Each one would have been like its own mini movie and contained storyline. And of course, there's the budget to take into account. I think the right choice was made in the end because the 50s itself was a vibe, and it was a great season.
I mean, I do applaud them. They have so much ambition. Even in the last season, They had so much like ambition and vision for what they wanted it to be. And I think as it stands, season 7 is really ambitious, and they pulled it off. Could they have pulled off that ambitious time hopping? I don't know. I'm glad they didn't try though.
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten flavors of it over the years, and even in the series finale, we did see the 70s when they were all accomplished in their own ways. So we got to see some of the 70s fashion and the era of feminism. So that was cool. We did see, was the episode about their parents, was that one in the 90s?
80s, I think, was it?
80s,
I think 80s. I think so.
Okay. Because I know we've done different eras before, and sometimes that one might have been like going back to a well that they had already been in. But did we ever actually cover the Riverdale riots? That got talked about so much through the series, and I wonder if they would have finally done that, what exactly happened, if they had done the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s timeline arc they had originally planned.
When were the riots?
I feel like the riots date changed so many times, but
that checks out.
Because I feel like the parents had said it happened during their parents' era, or maybe a little bit after that. It's either somewhere it's probably in the 80s. Either the 70s or the 80s is when the riots happened.
I don't know, but I'm glad they didn't do it, if I'm being honest. Again, it just seems like so much, especially for the final season.
Yeah. Or I felt like if they had gotten another season, we would have gotten stuck in yet another time. They probably would have gotten like stuck in the 90s and then gotten to the present in a season 8.
You know, if they had a full season to do it, maybe. But I think they made the right choice with sticking put in the 50s.
Oh, I don't trust them even with the full season to be able to.
Oh, neither do I. But I mean, like, they definitely could have pulled it up with trying to fit it in each episode.
At least 22 episodes of a try.
Yeah.
I do. I just love Roberto showing restraint. Like, I love it.
Yeah, because it's like, do I do the off the walls, ambitious banana pants arc that we wanted to do, or do I do the love letter? And he chose the love letter. And to other showrunners, it's weird to say take notes about Riverdale, but take notes in that regard in terms of a final season. Like, let's keep it tight and keep it together for the love letter and what you want to do for your show and your own vision.
They pulled it off.
They did. Oh, speaking of pulling things off, though, so we did get some ratings. Unfortunately, not the full Live Plus 7 ratings for Sullivan's Crossing and Spencer Sisters when they premiered, but Sullivan's Crossing came in CW strong at 500,000 views.
CW strong. Yes. I'm crying.
It's true because like we look at the other networks.
It's really good. They're on the right side of $500,000.
Yes. And Spencer Sisters, I think surprisingly, not because of the content of the show, but more so because there tends to be a stark drop off when it comes to the 9 o'clock slot on the CW, but they managed 490,000 views. So they retained really much of the audience for Sullivan's Crossing.
That's proof in the power of a really good pairing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the Spencer Sisters was not as heavily promoted, I feel like, as Sullivan's Crossing. So the fact that the ratings are essentially the same, that's very impressive, and you don't get to hear that as much these days. So I mean, like, no criticism on my part. They really pulled it off in the end. The big question is now, can they continue to hold on to those numbers? Because let's be honest, this is as close to Superman and Lois and Walker that any of these new shows have come. The Chosen aside, because it's found its Sunday night groove. But like, if it can hold on to them, these shows are in a good place.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Well, we know Sullivan's Crossing is going to be on again on the CW.
If they were smart, though, they would just like wait for the week 2 numbers, which I'm sure probably won't be as bad, but then just like quickly renew it, because like I feel like that's better than promoting a show, is renewing it so that people know it's going to be back. For the right show. I think that is the right move sometimes.
For sure.
But honestly, like I feel like the Spencer Sisters shouldn't have needed promotion, and maybe this is just me, but I'm like, you have Leah Thompson, that's her name, right? Leah Thompson. Like, she's an icon. Like the Sullivan's Crossing rested so much on the shoulders of Chad Michael Murray, and to a lesser extent, no shade, Scott Patterson coming back to the CW. And I'm like, you have Back to the Future, Caroline in the City, which I think people forget that was one of the great must-see TV NBC sitcoms of the 90s. I'm like, she's a legend. You shouldn't need to promote it. She should be, I don't know. I just, sometimes people are just underrated and they don't get their flowers. And I'm like, lift Leah up.
Well, I do think
maybe I'm alone. Come on an island.
It's more so that, like, so for audience members, like, I would be part of the demographic who's familiar with her, but like I wouldn't like run to the TV. And so like I would need the promo. I would need the like, what is the show about? Like, you got me because you have her name and you have her face. I'm like, oh, I know her. But what is she doing? Like, what are we doing in this mystery drama? Correct? We're investigating things.
Comedy, I think, too. It's a little slapstick, I feel like.
Oh, okay. Well, she does great at that, actually.
Yeah.
So,
But I also, like, if we get season 2, I need nepotism to do its thing. And her daughter Zoe, get her in there for a what do they call it? Stunt casting. Get her. Just let nepotism do its thing.
Oh, they would totally do that, especially if we don't know what CW is cooking in the background. They keep talking about how they have shows just a boiling back there that they can't tell us about just yet. But if they casted her, I mean, I know she's more of a film darling, but if she ever wanted to do prime time,
I'm like, girl, you're here because of your mom. Let's do this. Sorry, that was a little honest.
But I do think that they should renew it. This is a strong blow. It's right out the gate, so we do have to wait. But still,
those comedies are not cooking like they wanted them to. So it's like, no. Brad.
They're stuck though with them, right? Because I'm looking at those numbers. For those who are not paying attention to the comedy block or any of the other series,
I don't think anybody is. If we're being honest, the numbers are
very. They're scary. They're scary numbers. We're a little under 200,000.
We're bordering toward. I feel like definitely close to like the 10,000s.
We're hanging on to triple digits.
It's Riverdale Sunday numbers.
It is, and like with none of the like capacity of being able to say, yeah, but we were doing really good for the first like 4 to 5 seasons. Like we were just starting out with these ones.
Yeah, they didn't have tenure.
We probably will not see them in 2024 on the network back again, unless they're filling in the summer.
Hey, it was an experiment.
It was an experiment, and they did their best. We're trying to not go down to the tens of thousands, stay in the hundreds
I'd
of
be
thousands.
down for some A/B testing though. Like these were a very specific kind of comedy. Let's go the other side, get something different.
Yeah,
maybe a multicam. Come on, Frasier's back. Multicams are hot.
It doesn't really make you think what next year's schedule could look like, because we did talk about how different this year's schedule is, because there's none of the recognizable shows left, bar the 4 that aren't airing yet. If all these experiments fail, are we just going to have a heap of new experiments next season? Is that what every year is going to look like on the CW? Just new shows, no tenure? That's both scary and exciting at the same time. Yeah.
I mean, like if we're going back to the 2000s with Chad Michael Murray and like we're going to the power of nostalgia, I'm like, then let's try to I really think a multicam sitcom. Like, don't forget where you started, CW. It was multicams. Reba.
Excellent television.
She built you.
Yeah. But to go off with it, to start on the schedule though, so I'm a little scared of the mid-season because there has been some word like from the Hollywood Reporter that the All-American Universe, so All-American Homecoming, as well as Walker, likely won't return until April. And then Superman and Lois won't return until sometime after that because of the visual effects they have to do for the show, which means January through March, we're coasting. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't see Joan in that time or the Librarian's Next Chapter in that time, but it does mean the schedule is probably going to be a little funky. We're still going to be riding it out. Which is unfortunate, but it could be a vibe if we see Joan and we see the Librarian's Next Chapter.
What's that other one that they had on deck? The one that AMC canceled?
Oh, 61st Street. But that one's supposed to be paired with All American. So I don't know, unless they're just going to go ahead and put it on air in January since they need to fill a spot.
Yeah, if they got nothing else, I'm like, pull up. Get them off the bench. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there and waiting. And these comedies are not doing it. So, and probably Crime Nation will make its debut sometime in the mid-season.
I forgot about that.
This is where all those shows that were greenlit, and you're like, what? This is where all of them will turn up now. It is going to be weird, but can I just say how great it is to be able to talk about those 4 shows again? Because it feels like good old-fashioned CW. It'll just, like you said, be a bit of a track to wait for March until they begin.
Well, yeah, the April date has got me like, but like it is 13 episodes for all the seasons except for Superman and Lois because that one's getting 10. So we will be rolling into the summer with them, which I thought CW was trying not to do that, but
they haven't had a normal season since 2020, and it is stressful.
Yes. Season 3 was the closest we got. I know a lot of people were worried that it would roll into fall next year, which that could be such an unusual thing because you'd have a 2022 to 2023 show ending up in, or 2023 to 2024 ending up in the next season, and that's kind of bonkers to me. But at the same time, if it has to happen, it has to happen. Like at the end of the day, we know Warner Brothers wants to keep Superman and Lois on the air until Superman Legacy comes out. At the end of the day, the strike is still ongoing. As far as the actors are concerned, Superman Legacy will have been delayed every bit as much as Superman and Lois will be. So even if season 4 does run on into next season, I don't think that will hurt its chances of a season 5. All it needs to do is just continue to perform, and hopefully Warner Brothers will be able to whisper sweet nothings in the CW's ear to keep season 5 on deck.
I just realized though, with where they're coming in at in the schedule, that means they might once again miss the typical renewal cancellation season, and we'll be sitting on for a while to figure out, unless they are Mole, we haven't called on you in the longest time, but whisper in somebody's ear, leave a memo, leave a note. If they already know these are final seasons for these shows, tell us. I don't want to be waiting until May and they've known since like this month that they're not.
Don't wait until they're writing episode 9.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, just don't. What did we learn from Nancy?
Right.
Not to invoke the Nancy Drew debacle, but like, what did we learn? Hopefully something and not nothing.
Oh yes. Also, too, the showrunners with shows premiering next year. Read the writing on the wall, please.
Let's go in with clear eyes, full hearts. Can't lose. Come on.
Yes.
And I don't think we've been on the air since that last Superman Lois news came out, where they said, was it Brad mentioned that there was the possibility that now that the show's been in a place where it's cheaper and that it has less episodes to produce, that actually makes it more viable for a season 5 renewal. So I just wanted to get that out there. That's good news. That's the best news the CW has given us all year. But also, don't let that manipulate you into thinking that season 5 is a dead cert. Yeah, that has not been confirmed. We don't know that. Write as though season 4 is a mini season, a mini movie. Write it like it's your last, just like you've done with the last 3.
Yeah, to quote Ariana Grande, stay woke, don't sleep.
Yeah.
I temper expectations for those who are listening as well. Just do it. I feel like if we're all locked down with the idea that CW could once again turn on its head, everybody's going to be fine. For everybody, those who are holding out for the shows, the fingers crossed, right? We're not saying things won't get renewed, but please remember what era we are in with the CW. Don't light anything on fire. Don't harass nobody. Don't be in anybody's DMs if things don't go your way.
Save the tweet to drafts.
Yes. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yes. But that is it for CW News. So we can roll right in to Tarzan, episode 3, Wages of Sin is the title. Which
such a intense title. The whole episode I was like, what is this about? It's a little intense.
You know, I feel like it didn't match the intensity of the title, but still a very solid episode.
Yeah, it felt like the title, I think, alluded to the father of the kidnapped child being into
right
gambling debt, but I'm still like a little intense.
Yeah, because that plot was like a subplot of a subplot of a subplot.
I feel like they didn't even wrap up the whole father gambling debt thing.
No,
it was just the twist. So it was they were like, how do we make a standard child abduction a little spicy? And they were like, you know what? Let it be the father. He's gambling debts. And somehow he was going to extort his own wife into providing him with the money.
And the wife, to our knowledge, never found out. We didn't get to see her find out. And I feel like on any other procedural, we would have had Jane sitting down and being like, so your husband was corrupt. He has also passed.
Nobody checked on that woman, and then she was.
We got the baby out of the trunk, and that was
yeah.
So that woman potentially lost her child, lost her husband, and found out he was evil all in the space of 2 days. Nobody checked on that poor woman.
Speaking of her, did anybody else recognize her?
Looked familiar, but I forgot.
She was like a mom in a Disney Channel movie or something. I could not place her, and I too forgot to look her up.
Get on the IMDb.
Sorry to that woman.
But it's right there, right on the tip of the knowledge.
It's right there, and I could not place it. I'm like,
she looks like a TV mom.
Yeah, I saw you on a decom.
I think, but okay, to sort of encapsulate the case, I thought that it was a good way of showing us Tarzan's abilities and how they can assist law enforcement. It was far-fetched, even for fantasy.
And it's a little, again, I don't know if this is a case of the quality of which we are watching it, because it is 360p, y'all. I don't know if it's the quality or if it's just watching him. The shots are gorgeous of him hopping and just sitting there and perched, but we're watching him sniff essentially. He's hunting, and it's just not that captivating to watch.
No, well, and then having
visually
scenes be done,
the visual.
Well, visually, and then I know I shouldn't poke holes in it. It is simply fantasy action. And I know the selection of the bear was for narrative significance. But I was like, shouldn't you get something with a stronger scent out of that room for him to actually use? But then we are also in the city. How's he finding his child's scent under all of that? I mean, I have faith in Tarzan, but Tarzan hasn't been in the city that long to be able to differentiate smells.
It's such an odd one, and I don't know whether we needed more lore there, but I'm struggling to understand the actual lore, and this is coming from me. You know what my genre is. I will buy anything with superpowers or anything in it. But like, if we thought when they pilot up and he was experimented on, and then that was quickly dropped, we found out that he seemingly developed these powers and abilities in the jungle. There's just been no development there, so we're just kind of, it feels like this is written for people who know the Tarzan lore, and I do understand that, but there are going to be a lot of people who are watching who wouldn't, and you're like, how can he do all that? Like, you know, the way it's like Smallville, you could see Clark's X-ray vision, or he could have the effects when he heard. If Tarzan was an alien from another planet, I would have bought it instantly. Whereas I'm just, how did he pick all this up, and why don't we, like Reed says, see any kind of visual cues of it happening? It just happens and we go with it.
Yeah, we're just like looking at him and I'm like, what am I watching? Like there's no like a flutter in the way that the screen looks or something, or like he's not really like focused on anything. Again, like I don't know if we saw it clear, if it would make more sense. But I'm also like you said, like we need more lore. And on one hand, I'm so glad we're not getting like flashbacks to his time on the island, which one they probably could not afford it because they probably gave the show like a pat on the back and like a coupon because they had other stuff on the burners on the WB at the time. But I feel like we do kind of need something like that. Like it can be cliched to like employ flashbacks as a narrative device to fill in the gaps. And I think that's a crutch a lot of shows use. Hot take. I'm a fan of linear storytelling.
Yep.
I'm not sometimes flashbacks do well, but sometimes they lean on it way too heavily. But I think there could have been a middle ground here where we see how he developed those powers. And it does kind of feel like with each episode, the powers, or I don't want to say powers, his sensibilities have become heightened, or there's something new, a new aspect to it. Because really when we meet him, he's just jumping. He's just flying. And then we kind of get a sense that he can hear things. We do see how he can hear things. I don't know. I mean, we don't, you can't really explain it, but they do show how he's like so far away, but he can hear Jane talking about him. But I do feel like there's a gulf between us seeing him be able to hunt and use scent to find things, but also not knowing how that came to be, because he's human for all we know.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen?
I'm wondering if we're just a little ahead of the plot. Because I will say, but by the end, you know, and we open, like he's walking around in the family mansion and I don't know if it's a hot house or whatever they're walking in, but I was like, were y'all doing Swiss Family Robinson up in here? Because there's so many.
I have questions about that too. There was like, he entered like an indoor jungle and I'm like, love that for him. But also she didn't explain why that existed. I was like, was it just like, did they have plants in there? And then just over the years, you didn't go in there and they just like, the years of not keeping up that space, just it became a jungle. Like I was like searching for an explanation, and she was just like, "This is normal."
Yeah, Catherine's like, you up this side of the house belonged to you and your parents, and I was like, great, but we're standing in the jungle. I would like where's the insight? Explain to him because he doesn't know. He's just oh trees. I could live here.
This was his Batcave moment. I was like, this is where he's going to set up his base of operations, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, it makes sense visually, but it doesn't make sense storyline wise, if you know what I mean.
I couldn't, they needed better lighting in that scene because I couldn't, again, 360p. Yes. Like I couldn't, he was like going through all the things and like I couldn't figure out the floor plan. Like where was he?
Yeah.
There were a lot of close-up shots. I needed them to pull back. Again, budget, sets, I get it. You're working with what you work with, but I think I needed a sense of place. As much as I loved it for him, I was like, I can't figure out where I am.
Right, because they do pull back and they show you the house. I didn't realize the house was so, basically the mansion was so big that we actually have entire wings.
I didn't know it was in the city either.
No, did not. Like, see, it's very easy for him to get from one place to the other somehow. But he climbed up the face of it, and then he found his old room, which was, I was like, okay, sure. But then that room leads to the jungle. And I said, where are we? I know we go up some steps when you go through the front door, and there's like a room to the side, and that's about it. But apparently, there's a whole wing.
Maybe we'll see it in the daytime next episode.
Where he's not trashing the room he's staying in.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, trauma. Are we discussing it? And they're like, no, he's going to throw a chair through the window and leave this house. Like, oh, I'll wait for more trauma exploration then.
Which, again, I was like getting frustrated with the whole, like, he's escaping. They're finding him. And then Jane saying, what are you doing here? You can't be here. And I'm like, 3 episodes in a row we've been having these conversations. It's wearing a little bit thin. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
And that scene where like Kathleen showed up outside the police station in her limo, just so extra for no reason. Absolutely pointless scene, because like, I know it's because Jane's not thinking, so that's why she sent Tarzan off. But I feel like the Jane we know would have said, "What are you doing out? It's not safe to be out. Go home." Like, did she not think that this man who spent 3 days in the concrete jungle, getting lost from everyone when he showed up at her apartment, was doing exactly the same to his aunt? He left her house and gotten lost again. So when she showed up practically looking for help, Jane was like, I don't know what you want me to do about it anyway. I feel like, did we need that scene? Because of course then she needed Tarzan's help for a completely different reason. I'm not sure that really added anything to the storyline. She was like, I need your help. Jane was like, I can't give it. And then she was like, I need to find him myself. I was like, we know all this. Not really sure what the point of it was, but I struggle with Kathleen a little bit because I love the character already, and we're not getting an awful lot of her. I said last week that their big reunion happened, and then that was it. She's furthered the plot, and that was it. Now suddenly they're living in the same house. He doesn't like living there, and he left her house at the start of the episode, returned to her house at the end of the episode. No kind of growth, character movement there whatsoever until the last few minutes. I like their relationship, but I think it could do with a bit more development, a little bit quicker. And maybe that's just me knowing we're running out of episodes, but need a bit more from that.
I would call the Kathleen shot outside of the police department, besides like wanting to do it for the drama of the limo there, it's the we have to pay her shot. It's like that's how I feel about like soap operas, when you're like, why is this character in this scene right now? They add nothing to it. The scene does that. It's like, did you have to pay the actor? We had to pay the actor today. So that's what feels like that scene is, right? They're like, Kathleen has to be in this. We've got to pay Lucy Lawless. She has a certain amount. Like maybe the contract says she has to be in a certain amount of minutes in the episode. We need another scene. If it doesn't matter what the scene's, though, it doesn't matter what the scene's about, but we're just rehashing what we already went through with her. They didn't give us any more information on Kathleen's struggle with being reunited with her nephew now that he's a grown man and how to navigate that. She does seem to be softer than Richard, more willing to see Tarzan as a person rather than as a means to an end, because Richard had that random man in the office talking about how we need to control him. He's going to inherit $6 billion worth of the company. And I was like, who are you? Are you the head of the board? You know, like, are you head of the trust? How do you fit into this story?
I'm really struggling with Richard. Sorry, go ahead, Reed.
Speaking of Richard, the one scene that I really like, there are multiple scenes that I really liked, but I guess to clarify, the scene with Jane that I really like, one of her interactions that I really enjoyed was her and Richard. They had a really good back and forth. And I was like, oh, this is good. This is like stakes. They hate each other. There's tension. And I'm like, I need more of this plot. I felt like he was a little bit underused. That whole like situation feels a little bit underused. Like with Kathleen, I'm like, it felt like we were getting somewhere with her motivations, with the trust, with who she is and what she does. And it just felt a little bit more on her side, like family oriented, and he's still like, I need to find him, I want him, and da 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 da. But I did like that back and forth between Jane and Richard. Kind of wish there was something else with Kathleen and Richard, or something within that story that was amped up apart from like, welcome to the jungle at my mansion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that scene between Richard and Jane was possibly the best scene that Richard's been involved with since the pilot, because if we're being honest, Richard hasn't had an awful lot to do in the pilot. I've done the same thing in the last 3 episodes, and I'm going to do it again. All he does is plan like an evil villain. If he had a mustache, he would be twirling it, and it's not doing anything. He felt like the big, like, Lex Luthor villain of the pilot. Again, we go back to why the pilot felt like a movie. He felt like the big bad that needed to be taken down. And now he's just completely disappeared into the background. And I think the reason the scene is with his scene with Jane was so good was because he was finally interacting with the main cast again. The last 2 episodes, he's been sitting in dark limos, hatching a plan, sitting in the corner of his office, hatching a plan, talking to Michael, hatching a plan. We've yet to see this plan in action. He then suggested they tail Jane, lost her, that amounted to nothing. I just want more from Richard. We need more dimension. There's definitely been a bit of a tease there that there is more to him behind the curtain, but we haven't seen any of that yet.
I do think the issue is the casework, though. Like, even though it's like the subplot of the subplot, it's still taking up so much space. And pacing wise, it's just all over the place.
Yeah, the case of the week felt like the A story this week, and it kind of was. This episode in particular, I was like, I had never seen anything like this on the WB. Like, it was just like a full-blown procedural with like, oh, also Tarzan's here. That kind of is to me what the episode felt like, and I feel like it should be flip-flopped. Which again, I don't know. I meant to look up who wrote the episode, not to place blame on that person, but just to, like, you know. But I just want to know, like, is this the WB was like, we really want a procedural, but we also want to try to like stay in the campy, like, supernatural sci-fi lane, fantasy lane. It just felt like too much, and maybe that's where the creator felt like hindered in the storytelling. Is like, I don't know, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but just things that I was thinking about during the case of the week. I'm like, to me, it was a better case than last week.
Yeah.
It was more interesting and more like fleshed out. But it was also like, why is this the Ace story? Like, I want to know about Tarzan.
Like, it's fighting to be the A story, though. Like, I do agree that it's sort of, for it to be the A story, it's giving, we care about it enough to use it as a vehicle of getting through some character exploration. Like, felt like every time we were working on the case, we were learning something a little bit more about the characters, but the case kind of was getting left behind until, like, Tarzan made a discovery. And I know some of that also had to do, for me at least, it was paint by numbers. And I'm trying to remember that we're watching a show that came out in 2003. So some of the things that they were doing might have been, you know, interesting to look at back then. I was thinking about that when the ransom came in via email, in the way that the person had used the cameras, I guess, around where the FBI had been staged to show, I know that you called the authorities. I can't trust you. The baby's going to die. And I was like, oh, interesting. Don't like that the FBI is so incompetent that no one decided to use something, like, at least put a jacket on. I was like, why do I see your
yeah, I spotted that even before we got the photo. I was like, if I can see that, the kidnappers definitely can.
No, because I was like, what? And I think, Michael, you had mentioned before that, at least in like some supernatural things, shows or superhero shows, they purposely make law enforcement incompetent. But it's so grating. It's really, they can be at least a little bit more competent than what they were in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, at least in Batman, we have Commissioner Gordon, who's like the only competent person on the police force. The rest of them can be idiots, but at least we have him. And in this case, of course, we have Jane. And I did want to bring that up as well. As an episode, this maybe wasn't as strong or as like a jaw-dropping as episode 2, but I agree with what Reed said. The case of the week was a bit stronger, so the baseline of the episode was an easier watch. It was a more interesting watch than last week's episode, even if it didn't have the whole like season within a story that last week's episode did when Michael died at the end. But it did kind of remind me, Sabrina, of The Batman, because that was a movie that was basically, wasn't like your typical Batman movie. It was just a detective story. Whenever there was a new break in the case, Gordon would take it and go off, and then he'd investigate privately with Batman. That's exactly what this was kind of like. Jane needed that kind of like help from Tarzan. So the whole investigation just became about the two of them tracking it down. And I really did like that. But it's a double-edged sword, because on the other end of it, I've watched procedurals, and I know a lot of them in British TV do a lot more effort than the typical broadcast ones would. But in procedurals, you get to know the characters of the week, you get to know their social security numbers, who they love, everything that's going on about them. And you're other than this poor woman that was put through hell, other than 2 scenes with this woman involved, we knew nothing about these characters. So that made it a little bit flat. It would have been easier to get behind the case of the week. And I know I just compared a 40-minute TV episode to a 3-hour film, so you're never going to get that level of exploration. But I do think all the makings were there for a much stronger episode than episode 2, and it mostly pulled it off. I have to say, I really did enjoy this episode, but some of the by the numbers weaknesses kind of pulled it back, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I know last week I brought up Jane being underdeveloped. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you think this episode like helped us get to know her a little bit better? For me, I will say I feel like I'm still trying to figure her out.
Yeah, same. So I don't feel like I don't think episode 3 fleshed her out that well. I mean, we had moments, right? So the opening where we're at Michael's funeral, and she's clearly carrying a lot of weight. She even recognizes that by the middle of the episode that she's blaming Tarzan for Michael's death, and it's not Tarzan's fault. I will say that I think the thing that I keep brushing up against is they need to do more than I'm usually a straight-laced person who has it all together, and I can't figure out why I'm letting all my life fall apart for this man I met like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Like, I need more motivation than that. Like, what is it about him? What is it about this situation that compels you to go against who you are at your core?
The thing I'm struggling with too is I don't understand why she loved Michael, why she was so desperate to be with him. Like, I understand your boyfriend died, you're sad. That sounds so like I'm minimizing it, but I'm like, I don't know. I want her to explore. She was having. It was a complicated relationship. She didn't want to marry him, but she was so desperate to stay with him in a way. Like we said, like she was like, hit me, or like, no, I'm sorry, or whatever things she said when he tried to like brush her off. Like it felt toxic. And I'm like, are we going to examine that? Do we not realize that's something that we brought up in the scripts? Is that on the Tarzan front, it's like, is she clearly, to me, it seems like polar opposites. Tarzan sees her, Michael controlled her, it felt like. And I don't know, she might not have gotten there yet. You're right. I feel like we need a little bit more to examine who she is, and it can't just be like you said, like, oh, I'm a type A person, I've had it all planned, and now a thread was pulled and it's unraveling, and my sister's hugging me in my apartment, even though she's kind of mad at me.
Yeah. To your point, I feel like not to criticize a network TV show for doing a network TV thing, but we did get some character development this week, and it was literally that base level network TV development. It's like on The Flash when Barry's acting up, and then the case of the week makes him realize something, that he learns his lesson. You're like, this doesn't make up for the fact that you spent 6 weeks playing charades when your wife was melting through the Speed Force. But sure, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like one episode, one little minor thing suddenly makes you realize, oh, I've been looking at this all wrong. The Jane was in one place at the start of the episode. She was in a different place at the end of the episode. The case of the week and working with Tarzan helped to realize that. And I'm like,
but did it really, was the case of the week, like her leaning on his help, really just meant to soften her to him? Because it still felt like she was keeping him at arm's length. Yeah. Like, I don't need every time they have an interaction for her to say, you have to leave now. Like, yeah. Like just once, I'd like for her to like turn around and he's gone, because he understands. Like, for a show that there's so many scenes where things are unsaid, I don't need to hear her tell him to leave every time. Mm-hmm. That's probably nitpicky. I'm sorry.
It's not.
It's sorry to the writers. I don't mean to be mean about your 20-year-old show.
But it is. It's like, again, I think we're just maybe judging it more intricately because we have less time with it. But the show is the core couple. We saw the chemistry there in the first place. You don't want them to be miserable at not understanding each other every time they're on screen, and it feels like we're wasting episodes doing that. Because
I do love though that like we're treating an 8-episode series as like 100 episodes, like episode 3, and we're so deep into the analysis.
We're making the most of it. But like, yeah, it's just speaking of making the most of it, I don't think they're making the most of the chemistry. And I don't want to sound like some shipper who's like, it has to be all about Tarzan and Jane. That's not it. Their back and forth when they were working together on the case was great. But like Reed said, it started with, I need you to leave. It ended with, let me take you back to your aunt's house, which is basically the same sentence in different font. You know what I mean?
To him like at least a bajillion times, go back to your aunt's house. Let me take you back to your aunt's house. Like,
exactly.
Hey, girlfriend, we got it.
And it didn't amount to anything. So yeah, I agree. The case of the week made her realize a fraction of something, but it hasn't really changed the status quo. And for a show that literally destroyed the status quo 2 episodes in a row, it feels like we're doing that basic press the pause button now, and I kind of want things to move quicker, and I know that's just because we've only 8 episodes.
I just really don't know if, because it felt like Jane's motivation was just distraction, and it felt like she was using him for as a tool for the case. And I know like while doing that, she's kind of like seeing like, oh, he's like confident, he can do things, that's attractive. But I don't know if it's as deep as that. I don't know.
I don't know either. I feel like with Jane, well, actually everybody. So I think like one of the issues is things are happening in their own little bubbles. Right? So they're not really getting information about each other. Like, what if Kathleen had told Jane that Tarzan destroyed his room? What if we were actually thinking about the fact that he doesn't want to stay in the house because he'd been held captive for how many months that Richard had him? Was it 6 months, I think? And wasn't allowed to leave. Like, what if we passed the Bechdel test?
And you're so right, because like everything that happens on screen should happen for a reason, and it shouldn't just exist. Not that everything needs to lead to something, but like if something happens, it can, that can be shared and to connect other storylines and character motivations. Like there's a lot that Jane doesn't know still.
And there's a lot that's not explored with her.
That's a flaw of the scripts.
Yes. Same with Nikki. I wanted to pass the Bechdel test so bad with the sisters. I feel like if Nikki got to talk to her sister about her personality rather than the men in her life, we'd get somewhere with Jane as a character.
And why does Nikki exist solely in this apartment?
Yeah. I thought of you literally as soon as she appeared on screen. She was walking out of another doorway. She wasn't tired this time. She wasn't yawning, but she was literally walking out of a doorway the first time we saw her. And then the second time we saw her, she was heading towards the front door. I was like, this girl that does nothing but exist in doorways.
I feel like, I don't know if this is just the last image I have of her in my mind, but is she always wearing a red shirt?
I think most times. Maybe that's the color they've chosen for her. So maybe
Leighton is serving. I'm still like, the star of the show is her blonde hair. I'm sorry, it just is. I'm obsessed with it. Leighton, I love you. By the way, it's Leighton Meester season. Stream her album Heartstrings, like fall. It's Leighton Meester season. I'm going to promote that album to my dying day. Just to get that out there.
Get the plug in.
Yes. But no, like, she has 2 scenes. And they're both just to establish things for Jane. Like, first one being that Nikki is upset that Jane is not telling the police fully what happened to Michael. And I was like, you feel very strongly about this, which means that you seem to have had a connection to Michael, but we weren't really clear on that because he'd only been in 2 episodes. And then
we saw them in that kitchen one time,
being friendly about coffee in class, and that was about it. Not to say that she should be cold and be like, yeah, it's totally fine that you're not saying anything to the police about what really happened to him.
I am going to poke holes in it because this Nikki, from what we know of her, she's fiercely like loyal, and she has opinions, and she will let them be known. Which we learned in that one scene with her. She's like, you're not doing what I think you should be doing, and I'm low-key mad at you. And then still in the second scene, she's still kind of icing Jane. And I'm like, wait, where was I going? Oh no, why wouldn't this girl, from what I know about her, tell her sister, hey, I think this man treats you like garbage. That's a connection that I'm not, if she knows him enough to be like, if you know what happened in his death, you should say it. If she feels that strongly about it, maybe she's just an advocate for right and wrong in the law. Maybe she's in law school. We don't. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we don't know what she's studying. Do we?
I don't think so. I really don't. We just know that she goes to class at 8 o'clock in the morning.
But I'm like, if she should know him well enough, or their relationship well enough, if they were at a place where Michael would propose, although we know that he's who he was. Wouldn't she have known a little bit more about their relationship? But also, it seems like she did just move in with Jane, so maybe they weren't as close. But I'm like, I don't know. You're living with her.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't know him that well, you seem like a person that has strong opinions. Just based on very little information. So I'm like, I don't know if I can't fully buy into the fact that Nikki would be an advocate for Michael and Jane's relationship. That's a disconnect I have.
I don't think she knew that they were going to move in together either. Like, Jane didn't share that news with anybody. Not even sure if Jane shared the news about Michael proposing.
Jane doesn't tell anybody anything.
No, she keeps it very.
Sam's lucky. Sam's lucky. That's her partner's name, right? Sam. Mm-hmm. Which again, love him. Great. Love their scenes together, especially the end scene where he, for really no reason, protects her. Other than he's amazing, but she doesn't. Jane she keeps things in here. I'm like, girl, that's half the battle, girl.
And that goes back to the whole like whether Nikki's a necessary character, because obviously we've yet to see anything to prove that she is. But now that Sam knows everything, technically, I don't know what kind of bond they have, but technically, if the writers wanted, she could have had that conversation at the end with Sam instead. But it's just like we're finding places to use Nikki, and it's always to let Jane just unfurl her feelings or talk about how she's feeling. And I know characters like that are important, but we could use unfair. It a little bit more. Yeah, it really
Jane is so like, I don't know. She like didn't even look at Nikki. Like, I understand, girl, you're going through something. Your boyfriend died. You have weird feelings for this jungle man. But I'm like, Nikki was so done. She was like, I'm out. What are you doing today? What's happening? And then she just starts crying and like vaguely describing how she's feeling. Unconditional support from her sister. But Jane can't. Do I have beef with Jane?
Just a little bit, but it's understandable though, because I feel like she's put everybody in her life in a very tough spot because of Tarzan, and like, she can't even articulate why.
I can't tell you, but I need you to support me.
Yes, well, that's exactly what she does with Sam. Like, so Sam really was trying to like treat her with kid gloves because she lost her boyfriend in a very terrible way.
And he's like, you got to give me something.
I know. And then she just gives him everything. And he's like, oh, what? I love him though, because he was like, so slow down. Let me understand this correctly. This man is potentially responsible for the death of Michael, and you're still letting him run around the city kicking people's butts. That's what we're doing. He just gets to beat people up just cause. And she's like, well, and I was like, no, you're right. Tarzan is just running around the city doing what he wants to do. And with no like restraint there. And I love that Sam was like, I would die for you, but I'm not going to lie for you. He does end up lying for her at the end, but I did appreciate that he did draw a line.
Yeah.
He's like, this is too much. Like, you're asking a lot of me for this man that we know isn't dangerous, but from the perspective of Sam, based on everything they've seen, Tarzan's basically a vigilante.
Mm-hmm.
A barefoot one just running through the city. And he just wants to lock down the knowledge of what's going on. I think he did sort of get what was going on there because he saw them in their moment they had in the junkyard. And he's like, oh, well, let me just laugh at her. So we can save her career. And he appreciated that Tarzan was able to help this child. I think that went a long way for Sam because Sam is about justice, by not necessarily by any means, but he's going to do what he needs to do in order to take care of the people of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a man of honor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that scene, speaking of Tarzan helping the boy, when they find him and he has his bear, which the bear was off screen for a long time. I was like, what did we do with the bear? That's neither here nor there, but like after he sniffed the bear, which didn't happen on screen. So I was like, are we going to get a shot of him sniffing the bear? This is not where I was going with this thought. I promise you. I'm sorry. But when he's kneeling down talking to Jason and he's like, what's the bear's name? He's like, my mom called him Leo, but I call him Thomas. And he's like, oh, he has two names like me. And like the small like focus on Jane. I'm like, yeah, girl, you're not calling him Tarzan.
That was a learning moment. That was her development in the episode.
I wanted him just to like look up at her.
It's like, call me by my chosen name. Tarzan.
But that moment took me out because that's something I think we discussed, probably not on the pod, but
yeah.
Since it happened on screen, I was like, I need to mention this.
Yes.
But I will say there have been a couple of moments in this episode that I did like, as far as that sounded weird. I liked a lot of moments in this episode, but there were a couple of Tarzan moments I really liked, because one of the most interesting things we managed to pull out of the script last week was how shocked and upset he was that humanity would do things like this to each other. And then you got to see that this week as well, because much of the case was through his eyes. Of course, we find out he connected with Jason for another reason, because of the idea of a boy ripped from his parents, and the bear at the end, of course, as well. So what it meant to Tarzan. But we did also get to see that this is a young man seeing the world in a different light for the first time, and that it's not, because he grew up in the jungle where I assume the animal kingdom looked after him and he looked after them, and they were all happy until humanity ruined it. So now he's seeing that humans just can turn on each other, and that someone would do that to their own child for money. Just the look of disgust on his face matched the look of disgust last week. And I really like this kind of subplot that's running through it, as he gets to see mankind for the first time in a way he never saw it before. It was subtle, and I really, really enjoyed that arc.
It's nice to be able to hook into that emotional, I don't know, like a story arc for Tarzan, where he is opening his eyes to the world. I also liked the shots we got of New York City. We really did have a moment. We were talking about that last pod episode where we're like, we want to see Tarzan, navigate the city. And they were like, wait, episode 3. Episode 3 is when you'll see it. And it is to the tune of that Matt Nathanson song I saw, and it plays twice. And
we had Tarzan in a full Matt Nathanson music video.
Yes, like with the guerrilla shots of the streets of New York. I'm pretty sure we just set up a camera and kept pulling back, because I think those are tourists in the background, not extras. There's a couple in the back who were just like, what's happening? Why is he walking?
Are they looking at the Barefoot Man, or are they looking at the production?
I loved it. Like, I had seen on Wikipedia, there's like a grid of all the music used in each episode, and I had seen that Matt Nathanson was in it. Completely forgot, and when it started playing, I gasped. I love Matt Nathanson. Nathan, did I say it right? Nathanson. But like literally yesterday, like I love listening to him in the fall. So yesterday I had like a fall candle on. I was put my favorite Matt Nathanson album on. Like, it's such a vibe every fall, and I was just so excited to hear his music. It was perfectly placed because it was 2003 peak Matt Nathanson song. Remind me to tell you a little bit about the song after we wrap. I don't want to do it on air. Some things need to stay in the group chat, everybody. This is a lesson. But yeah, it was funny when it came back. I was like, oh, he's still in music video mode.
I didn't expect to hear it twice either. But then I was like, oh, he gets a theme this episode. This is clearly his theme.
He did get a theme. A good theme it was.
It is such a classic thing to do as well. Like, it was moody and it was broody, and the fact that it came back as well. This is what Sabrina just mentioned it. This is what we were saying last week. I want to spend more time with Tarzan, figure out what kind of person he is on his own. And just those establishing shots are so important. Obviously TV shows love to use the same recycled establishing shots of a city before we pop into the city and whatever. But just to see new footage of him walking through the city, learning more about humanity, I think it really played into his arc really well. And bless him, the fact that he ended up getting soaked and like sat on the roof freezing instead of going back to his aunt's house. I thought, are we getting like a storyline where he gets sick or something here and he needs people? It's like, because it was like what Reed said about how we remember that Tarzan's portrayed like this superhuman person, and we're like, no, actually he's human. We're like,
Tarzan uses NyQuil for the first time.
Oh, but they should do things like that though. They should
rely on other people.
Cute little moments where like he's actually interacting with things that he would have no like concept for.
Yeah.
Has he like eaten a meal?
No.
That's a good point.
Jay needs to buy him a hot dog.
Yes. Because actually, I think we've only seen 2 meals in this series so far, and both of them happened in the pilot episode.
That's something that that I pick up on sometimes. I'm like, when did they eat?
Yeah.
You always want to know.
This is a cop show. We could stick a few donuts in there, put them at the desk.
Well,
Yeah,
I
because
love
like
the pretzel from the pilot that they're eating.
yeah, there's just like in episodes, there's so much drama going on. I'm like, did you guys break for lunch? Like, I'm worried about you. Are you taking care of yourselves? There's a lot going on. Did you remember to eat?
Just eating from the bun box while they're investigating. But I really did appreciate the ambitiousness of some of the shots, like the cities. Like this isn't Vancouver doubling for New York City. Like you got to see the when he walked through Times Square, just like in the pilot. It just it gave it that larger than life, almost cinematic feel that we haven't really felt from the show since the pilot. So between that and the fact that it added to Tarzan, I didn't mind that we stopped the plot for that. I've said this before, I think about the Winchesters. Modern television just burns through the plot of an episode so quickly. There's no time for character moments. There's no time for the added little extra. This was nostalgia 101, and it felt it through and through.
Yeah, there was something that I caught myself thinking while watching that sequence. As much as I love that Matt Nathanson song and love the sequences, I'm like, at the end of it, I was like, okay, so that kind of amounted to nothing. And then I'm like, no. Pull back. No. It's the modern television has you brainwashed. Things can breathe and it's fine.
And it really does allow you to see that I have to Google to see if this is actually true, but they are in New York City. I really think that we are filming on the streets of New York City, and it's nice. I mean, it's all mostly in Times Square, which is giving them a little bit away of where they can actually film. But I've enjoyed it. I like being able to see the city as much as it could show us. And in the afternoon and nighttime, because they show you again, I was like, oh, Denzel Washington had a movie out at the time that they were filming this. So it's a nice little capture of the moment in time in which they're filming.
It was. See Tarzan watch TV.
Yes, that'd be fun.
Would he be afraid of the screen? Because he hasn't seen TV in years, maybe ever.
I think he would. So the cartoons would probably be fine. Like if they put on some Hanna-Barbera. But like if he were to have seen, like say maybe the cop shows of the time or the action movies of the time, he might have been threatened by like the use of guns or the use of violence. I mean, he uses violence in apprehending people, but seeing
it's going out the window. That
TV,
he's lifting it and it's going out the window.
Yes. Kathleen, lock things down. Bolt them to the floor. I think that's it for episode 3. I will say that there was more music in this episode than I had been used to from the previous ones. I'm still sorting out my feelings and how on that. I felt like we maybe didn't need as much music as we had. It was reminding me of more modern television where there's a song for practically every scene. But I will say the songs that they did choose, though, they fit really well.
Yeah, it really hit you with the nostalgia, didn't it? Because you're right, modern television tends to have songs playing in the background an awful lot, and unfortunately these days they're not songs But whereas television back then used to hit you over the head with these powerful musical sequences, and there were a lot of them in this episode. I won't argue with that. It's as a fan of that, I really did enjoy it, but I know what you mean. One came after the other, after the other, after the other. Whereas in the pilot, Avril Lavigne just caught you off guard because it was like such a isolated one. But there was a lot of nostalgic elements in this episode as well, maybe even more so than the previous one. Like I did love the previously on the WB's Tarzan at the opening. And that's such an interesting thing to me because it was like a previously, but also an intro to the show for someone who hadn't seen it. Like my name is Barry Allen on The Flash. They merged the two of them and came up with this. I love how they always used voiceover back then for exposition. It was so unnecessary, but oh, what a piece of history.
We're probably going to get that again because I think the pilot and episode 2 were supposed to be a 2-parter for whatever reason. So that's probably why they didn't do that. I don't think they aired together, 1 and 2. I don't know, strange. But also the bumper for the Tuesday night new episode of Everwood. I tell you, my soul left my body. Just to see that was so just like spiritually affirming.
Yeah. And the all new Smallville as well.
Oh,
what a time.
It was so good. I there's the promo at the end too.
Yeah.
So you get like a little Snapchat, what? Snippet. Snippet of what's to happen next. And we're gonna have a case with a sniper. That should be interesting. Every time we watch a show, I have to remember to Google, because I was like, sniper, is this before or after the DC sniper? And if they were commenting on that, because that was a very terrifying time in the US on the East Coast. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens in episode 4. I also noticed that in the title card for Tarzan at the end, it mentioned AOL and the AOL keyword for the WB. So I can't remember if that's how you would get into the website or not.
I have no idea. What a time. Remember.
Really, right? For our Gen Z listeners who were not alive or cognizant of what was going on the internet around that time, American Online was how you would get on the internet. It was like one of the only ways you could.
Yeah.
And how you
get just to think
too.
that like 10 years ago, like every show or network would like put the hashtag above the logo of the network. Do you remember that era where it'd be like hashtag Revenge ABC or whatever? Every show was like, get on Twitter and talk about the show. They wanted to be trending like that. I feel like that was, well, now that's dead. I don't know. No one knows what to do anymore. But to think that was that version of a hashtag.
Oh, one last thing though, because it just came to my mind. The opening after the previously on, and we get Michael's funeral. I thought it was such a campy and good choice that the action sequence is set to Amazing Grace on the bagpipes.
It's just the pilot had no music during its action sequences, and we went straight through to that. Wow.
Because I was like, what is that? That's Amazing Grace on the bagpipes as he's kicking tail on the roof.
It's like so emotional, but also with every shot.
Yes. Like, we're laying this man to rest, but also we're going to be fighting on the rooftop.
Such like a big moment for a character that I didn't care about.
Yeah, it was.
I have to kick extended. That man while he's been expired, but like, I was like, I don't. Okay, whatever. Get the hero send off for whatever reason.
I know. Well, I feel like they also just want to show Jane and her dress blues. Like, they were like, let's just show her in like the full regalia, like that she has to wear for him. Let's do the American flag because he was a hero. I thought I saw the French flag for a second, and I was like, what's happening? Is he French American? But I didn't go back to see like what flag that actually was, but it was giving the French flag, and I was like, then why the bagpipes? But
all the feels.
They were just covering all the bases.
But yeah, I have to say, I know we spent a lot of time critiquing it, but I really did enjoy this episode on a whole. I think I enjoyed it overall more than episode 2, because episode 2 went from slow movie to, oh my God, we're at 100%. What's happening? Whereas this one was just more of an enjoyable stretch.
I mean, look, the next 5 episodes could be the worst episodes ever produced on American television, and I would still stand the show so hard. Yeah. Like they got me. I'm begging for someone to release it in HD. Like, I want it on DVD, and I've only seen a third of the show.
It's because it is ambitious, though. It's trying new things. It's a lot of heavy lifting with Tarzan. So you can understand why we're having some issues. But we're here. We're locked into this ride.
Yeah.
Episode 4, here we come.
So excited.
Yeah, yes.
Well, that's it for this pod episode, y'all. Thank you for listening. We're the CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Reed.
Bye.